Hello, I'm not Gary Dublin. I'm Andrew Rule, host of the podcast Life and Crimes. But I'm here with Gary today, and I'll be asking the questions because Gary has a new book out, and I wanted to find out more about it. So welcome to you, Gary.
Thanks, Andrew.
First thing I want to ask you is, why would you do it? Why would you write a book? It's a lot of work.
I wish someone told me that before I wrote it. Andrew, how are you? I never had an intent to write a book. It's something that people had suggested in the past, and I think that plays out because of some of the higher profile investigations I've worked on. But the circumstances that led me to leaving the police, there was a lot of narrative going around about who I was and what happened. And it was at that point in time I thought, I want people to understand what I'm about. There's a misconception of different things that was said about me in the media, and it was sort of very high profile, I'd say execution, but that's probably too dramatic, but very high profile in the fact that I'd been criminally charged. I was a detective, a high profile detective, and facing criminal charges and removed from investigation. So on that basis, I thought, well, this is my side of the story, and that's what I said about writing the book. It's been about a 12-month project. One of the good decisions I've made, and one of the first decisions I made after I left the police, is to write the book with Dan Box, who was a crime journalist and who I knew and knew me, so that was a good mix. And I trusted
Good choice, I think.
Yeah, I trusted his integrity and also the fact that he knew me well enough to call me on my bullshit. So in that I mean that if I wanted to gloss over something, he'd delve deep into it, and I think that mix worked quite well. But it's certainly a big task, as you would know.
Two heads are better than one. I have worked with Dan Box back we were both younger. I was younger, but I was middle-aged, and he was a young reporter, and he always impressed me. Quiet, sensible, sane, and shrewd, I thought.
Yeah. He's a good voice of reason, that's for sure.
He is. Now, what's the case against Gary Dublin, according to Gary Dublin?
Well, that's interesting. Well, if I said nothing, you probably wouldn't let me get away with that,
I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah,
no.
Okay.
What do the bad people say about you?
Look, the narrative, I suppose I polarise people, and that people have strong opinions. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. With the fact that when allegations were made against me whilst I was a serving police officer, and the fact that that information, the internal investigation, was deliberately leaked to the media, caused me a great deal of concern, because if, at the worst, you could say Gary Dublin is the detective, now disgraced detective, that was removed from the Tyrrell investigation and has been criminally charged for breaches of the Listening Devices Act.
Gary, can I interrupt? I don't want to be accused of pouring warm fluid in your pocket at all.
Yeah.
I don't really know you.
Yeah.
I only know you a little bit by reputation. But what we're saying here is, and tell me if I'm wrong, you interviewed a good suspect, I would suggest, in the William Tyrrell case. That, of course, is the case of the small boy who vanished and clearly has been abducted. You interviewed a middle-aged man who lives nearby, who could, on any reasonable view, be someone of quite a lot of interest because of where he lives and various other aspects. He was as good a suspect as anybody else you could see that week. You interviewed him, and because you were concerned that the listening devices that you knew were already in place, you also recorded the conversation on your mobile phone. Is that roughly it?
That's roughly it. Yep.
This isn't actually indulging in child pornography, is it?
No.
You haven't been caught selling heroin to children.
No, and I'm glad we clarify that, because when you hear someone's recording stuff on their phone, you're thinking you could potentially think the worst. But it was the conversations I recorded was on a police issue phone that when I was speaking to a person about the abduction of William Tyrrell, that I had concerns that certain allegations might be made against me, so I recorded those conversations to protect my lawful interests.
Now, I just wanted to clarify it, because by skipping it, we might give people the impression that you are some sort of reformed bad guy.
Yeah.
Whereas in the view of any rational civilian, you are not bad at all, I would suggest. So I just wanted to clarify that, because if you were a really bad guy, we wouldn't be talking to you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. No, the charges, and I have been convicted at the local court. Now, local court matters. Breaches of the Listening Devices Act. My interpretation of the legislation is not what was accepted by the courts. But the thing is, Andrew, that with these allegations, now, the conviction at this stage, it's still a matter before the appeals court, but there's no suggestion I was doing it for any personal gain. I was doing it during the course of my my duties, and it's something that I've disputed from the outset, but because of the headlines, the way headlines can be, it's a detective charge, and that's not a good look. That's not a good look for a detective on a high-profile investigation to be removed and charged in relation to something that he was doing during the course of the investigation. So it's important that I give my side of the story so people can make their own judgment.
Did they try to get you for jaywalking as well, or not indicating when turning down bush tracks or anything like that?
It certainly felt that way. It certainly felt that way that, and this evidence played out in my court hearing at the local court, was that I made no secret of the fact that I had recorded the conversations, and people were aware of it for 12 months or more, that the conversations were recorded.
You must be a Jekyll and Hyde character, because I don't detect in you any of that sort of blustering, bully, standover stuff that some people might detect in some rogue police. Are you a Jekyll and Hyde character?
No, I'm not a Jekyll and Hyde character. I take... Yeah, well, some people might say I'm always a pretty bad bloke. But look, when I'm working a case, I work the case hard. I make no excuses for that. But I've been in the New South Wales Police for 34 years. I haven't had any criticism of me the whole time that I've been in the police, and there's been no complaints. And then all of a sudden, I'm so bad that I get taken off the investigations and put into a room for 3 months. It seemed quite ludicrous to me the way that this matter was dealt with from the outset.
It seems to me, to put a line under that this sounds like office politics, and which is bad news. It seems to be prevalent in police circles a lot more than it should be. And so what we'll do is get on and talk about the things that you joined up to do, and that is to catch the real bad guys who do bad things.
That'd be good.
And I take it that your book goes into some of those cases, Gary. If you were steering me towards the good bits, which bit would you steer me toward?
Well, the book I Catch Killers is my memoir. So it's about allowing, I hope, that someone that reads it would get an understanding of who I am and what I'm about and why I approach investigations the way that I do.
Yep.
One investigation that's played fairly heavily throughout the book, and it's because I suppose I've been on it for 25 years, is the murder of 3 Aboriginal children in Barraville. And
oh yes,
that's been a case that I first became involved in back in 1998, and I was still involved in it up until till I resigned from the police in 2018. And
terrible case in many ways.
And for those that aren't familiar with it, it's 3 Aboriginal kids, Evelyn Greenup, Colleen Walker and Clinton Speedy. They all lived in the same street in Barraville, an area that was referred to as a mission on the outskirts of the town. They were Aboriginal children, and they disappeared over a 5-month period of time. And there was an original investigation. I was brought in to do the re-investigation, and I found that investigative opportunities had been missed in the original investigation, and I've been working with the families. When I say I'm always talking about a team, because it's a team effort in major crime. Yep. We've been working with the families for the past 25 years trying to get them justice. So that plays heavily in the book. Other cases that reference is the murder of Terry Falconer, which some people may or may not be familiar with the name, but that was a prisoner that was abducted whilst on day release by 3 people purporting to be police officers.
Oh yes,
that was a very interesting case because we really delved into organised crime and a very dark side of the underworld. Terry Falconer was a police informant, and so we're looking at when we first started the investigation out a real who's who of the criminal underworld that might have had a motive to kill Terry. And he was abducted, and he was actually cut up and dumped in 7 bags. So it was a very brutal crime.
Oh my God!
But that investigation opened us up and linked us to other investigations. And at the height of that investigation, we were looking at 8 other murders. And it actually played out in the Underbelly TV series. It was the Underbelly Badness, that particular investigation. And that took 10 years, and that was probably one of the most complex type investigations that I've worked on, because the moves that we were making, there was a ripple effect. So we had to, for each action, there was a reaction, and it was a very difficult investigation, but one that we got some good results in the end, and it's something that myself and my team are very proud of.
Unbelievably dramatic scenario, isn't it?
It was, and there was, during the course of the investigation, there was other murders that occurred that we ended up putting some people away. There was a person from Victoria, Paul Elliott, that was killed, and we charged, and this was caught up in the whole investigation. We charged people with his murder as well.
Oh, is that right? I take it, by and large, it's ultimately drug related. They're drug traffickers at bottom, most of these guys?
It crossed over into all aspects of crime. We had bikies, certainly drug dealing. There was armed robberies. There was arson. Paul Elliott was he had a reputation for being a criminal down in Melbourne, and that was over a drug deal that went wrong, went sour. So it tapped into a lot of different groups, but it was a very interesting investigation.
I think you've had a lot to do with a police sniper and marksman, Brett Pennell. Can you tell us a bit about his work? And I think you're going to interview him in your forthcoming podcast. Is that true?
Yeah, Brett Pennell is going to be the first guest on the second series of the podcast I Catch Killers, and tells a very interesting story. And when I sat down and spoke with him, very honest and very raw. He was a sniper. He was a tactical police officer in New South Wales. He was a member of the TOU. And there was a siege situation down in the Riverina area that Brett was the designated sniper. And as a result of how that played out, Brett was the person that had to take a shot at the person and killed the person in the siege situation. And it's very raw and very rare. And I thank Brett for his honesty on talking us through it, and it gave a real understanding of the pressures and the demands on someone in such a demanding role as that of a sniper and a tactical police officer. So that's one of a number of guests we've got on the podcast, and we're looking at different areas of policing, the criminal justice system. We've had other police that have come on, but also members of the public, victims and offenders.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario that the sniper who is trained and then sometimes ordered to very calmly and dispassionately to pull the trigger on another human being, as opposed to doing things in the heat of battle to defend yourself, which is a different thing. It must be a unique form of pressure. Yeah.
Certainly the way Brett described it was that all the training, so it becomes the muscle memory and the training that you revert to under pressure. But the twist with snipers is that they're under so much pressure, because I can't think of any more pressure than you're under where you've got someone in your sights and you're going to pull the trigger.
Yep. At
that particular point in time, to carry out the trade of being a sniper, you've got to remain calm, and it's almost like it's a contradiction.
Totally.
The most time of most pressure, you've got to be your most calm, and Brett explains it very, very well and in a lot of detail, and then quite open about the impact it's had on him since he has taken that shot. And full credit to him. I think someone to put their hand up for that position tells me a lot about the person to start with, and that he's prepared to accept that type of responsibility. So, rather impressive human being.
I look forward to listening to that, because I think it'd be a big insight into a relatively rare thing in civilian life. Relatively rare. Now, let's run through it. You're recommending the book to me, a reader. I am a keen reader of these sort of things, the better versions of them. Not all true crime, Gary, is that good. Some of it's better than others.
Okay.
I'm thinking yours is.
You're setting me up for a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the next most interesting story?
What the book gives you, and when I sat down and talked with Dan about what this book is all about, and there was something that we hung on to about every investigation takes a little bit out of you and adds a little bit to you. And what we hope to achieve with the book, and I think where the listener will find it a little bit, the readers will find it a little bit different, is that it really shows what it's like to be a homicide detective and the price that you pay. And the price that you pay in, each job does take that little bit out of you, and we've really tried to get that across. People that have read the book have said it's very raw and honest, which scares me as the author. But that was the beauty of sitting down and doing a book with Dan, in that, as I said, he didn't let me skim over any part. Some of it was difficult talking about it, but I think it gives you a full appreciation of what life is like for a homicide detective. And look, this is just my story. Everyone's got their own stories, but I have been around long enough and been exposed enough in the public to be comfortable to actually say, well, this is who I am, and this is why I've made those decisions. So when you say that some true crime novels mightn't work, what we've tried to steer away, it's just not an account of I did this investigation and this person got 10 years and all that. It's more giving an insight into the psyche of how we operate. And some of the most interesting parts of the book, I think, is in the interview room when I'm sitting down interviewing suspects. And I'm fortunate that these matters have been dealt with at court, so it's public record, so we can get the full interview and the full transcripts out, and it gives you an insight into the strategy and the psychology of the interview room, which I don't think people often get exposed to.
No, I think it's always interesting for us out in the world to hear the answers that the accused makes, and to hear, to some extent, the rapport between the interrogator and the accused. It's a fascinating relationship, which would vary depending on a lot of things, on the time in the interview, probably.
And we've tried to give examples of interviews with different approaches, the way that I approach different type of offenders.
Yeah.
Which
such as.
Well, there's one particular offender in there that he murdered a person to abduct the person's 10-year-old daughter, and he's
good luck.
Jeffrey Hillsley. He's a scum. He's in jail for life, and the way that I did that interview, he was trying to shock me with some of these admissions and bait me, and in the book it shows how I dealt with that. There was another interview that I did with a lady that was responsible for the death of a young 18-month-old child, and it was basically her denials that led to the conviction. And so different ways of approaching interviews.
Oh, I see. And a full range of methods and attitudes from you. Some you would adopt a more robust attitude, and others you'd be conciliatory and draw them along into conversation. Is that
exactly? And we'll take you into the interview room, and it's. I don't think people often get to see inside the interview room. Even aspects of the interviews that I did during the William Tyrrell investigation are captured in the book, because again they're public record. by in part because of my trial, and that they were released there. And another side of the book that when I do speak to people, they always find it interesting, the relationships that I have with criminal informants, and I've got some very interesting characters in the book that have played a big part in my life, and a big part in some major investigations. And I think people would be surprised by the relationship that police have with informants. And I don't say the word lightly, because it is a relationship. That these are people that I've dealt with in real pressure situations, where they've got to trust me and I have to trust them. And I think the public would be amazed the type of relationship that forms. And when I say relationship, appropriate relationship, because I know that there's been relationships in the past between police and informants that are inappropriate. They're all above board, they're all accountable, but it's an interesting dynamic that, again, it's something that people don't generally get to see.
Very tricky one, because really you do need a level of personal trust and sometimes more than trust, even that somebody actually feels loyalty to the other in order to be able to do what they do.
Exactly, and there's one example for a particularly high-level informant wanted to know where I lived because he'd put his life in my hands. He wanted me to put my life in his hands, if that makes sense, and basically said, where do you live? And I pushed back a little bit for obvious reasons, and he said, well, if you don't trust me, how can I trust you? And on that basis, I made a decision to provide him my home address, and I'm still here, so it was the right decision. I've had other references in the book about when threats have been made towards myself and how I responded to those, which is part and parcel of being a police officer.
Looking back over it, if you were, in another many years, you're a grandfather and you're sitting back and telling teenagers, or perhaps, about what the work you used to do in the good old days, what was the sort of scariest time?
I've had some there's the emotional, the pressure situation, and that can be at 2:00 in the morning when you're being called out to a murder scene, and you're going to make a decision on, are you going to charge this person, let this person run, or whatever. I feel pressure like that. There's other examples, and I also did a lot of tactical policing, so that was with the SPSU and the Tactical Response Group, and that was siege type situations or arresting armed offenders. So I did some work there and close personal protection. So you get some interesting times in those activities. There's other things and there's one particular time I can remember that, and it's referenced in the book, that a drug job where a plantation was on Crown land, and so we're on what could be called a police stakeout, and the offender unleashed a couple of attack dogs and chased me and an offsider through the bush, and it was a covert operation, so we couldn't scream like we wanted to scream. But I had a junior officer in another location keeping observations, and after the dogs left us, because we went at them with some big sticks, he was attacked by these two attack dogs, and he was about 100 metres away, and I heard some gunshots, and then I heard him screaming my name, and I ran towards where he was screaming, and it was thick bush, and he came out through the bushes. I'm coming in the opposite direction. His chest was covered in blood, and I thought, and we were 45 minutes away from not only a police car but any help. It was in a remote location. And I thought he'd been shot in the chest, and I thought he was going to die on the spot. And he'd actually, in fighting with the dogs, when he tried to shoot the dogs and actually shot some of his fingers off. That was a pretty traumatic situation.
Oh my God!
But that
is traumatic. Do many dogs stand up to gunfire? If they hear the gun, most of them run.
When I was doing tactical policing, we were given like a OS spray, a gas spray that. Because quite often we'd be creeping up in the dead of night or early hours of the morning in the dark, and you're climbing over back fences, and it's amazing what you find.
Yes.
I had a shotgun and we were kitted up and we're doing a raid, and I was coming in through the back, climbing over fences, and I climbed over one fence, and then I had a Rottweiler about 6 inches from my face just growling at me.
Ooh.
And because it was covert, I couldn't shoot him, and nor that I didn't want to shoot him, but I was in a bad position, and I reached down and got my spray out and sprayed him full on in the face from about 6 inches away.
Yeah.
And he's just shaking his face, and then he continued growling at me. So I've pushed him away with the butt of my shotgun and just got the hell out of the backyard. So I think they might have just given us that spray to tell us that it's all right, the dogs will take off, but it had no effect on him. He just looked more angry than
that. Is very scary.
Yeah. There's plenty of situations that you find yourself in the police, and the start of the book is about a situation where I'm talking to someone that we wanted to arrest for an armed hold-up, and as I was talking to him, he was shot and killed, and that weighed heavily on me too. That was early in my policing, and so things like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it all adds up. It all adds up into when you join the police, you don't know where it's going to take you. But one thing I would say that, and it's certainly come out from the book, you're going to be a different person at the other end than you were at the start of your career.
Well, that's true. Do any of these things crop up in dreams? Do you ever have nightmares about any of these situations?
Look, I don't wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night and have a flashback to this or that. But sometimes, and it's more when you're ongoing pressure that, and especially if you're dealing with a particularly nasty crime or whatever, you just get a sense of you feel dirty if that's you're just dealing with too much evil, and that's how it impacts on me sometimes. Sometimes I think I just don't want to speak to another scumbag. I don't want to hear about another reason why this person's been murdered. And sometimes, you just don't. You want to see the good in society, and sometimes, being a homicide detective, as long as I do, you tend to look at the bad parts. But you got to remind yourself that that's not the whole world. That's a small portion of the world.
You're staring down at the gutter, not up at the stars too much as a homicide detective, I guess.
Yeah.
Police are human, and it must be very hard on them. Obviously is. Gary, it's been a privilege again to share your memories and thoughts. On this occasion, it's to tell people that you have done the book. I've read the promotional stuff and read the what we call the blurb in the trade. It's very sharp. It attracts the eye. I'll certainly be buying one, as you might expect. As I said before, I don't buy them all. They don't all grab me. I think true crime can be fascinating at one end of it and unbelievably tedious and amateurish at the other. It's a very broad church, but I think you'll be at the good end of it.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks again.
All right.
Gary Dublin.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy eye-catch killers, which you clearly do, you might take the time to listen to our podcast, Life and Crimes, available now wherever you get your fix.